The average cost of a new car last year in America was around $48,000. The average cost of a car shipped, exported from China last year was $18,000. So that's their sweet spot. They love manufacturing cars in the $20,000 price range, and that's why they're winning in so many markets globally. If it was an open market economy and everyone were friends, there's no doubt about it, the Chinese would be, the hottest selling cars in America today. They move extremely, they call it China's speed, and they're able to design, develop, engineer, and manufacture cars at about half the time that is required by Western automakers, including the Japanese and Koreans. So they have an expression in China called 996 Jiu Liu. It means 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week is standard. It's a Sputnik 2 moment that we face. It is existential. We have to get into a mindset of it's now or never. We have to hustle and change and fight and battle like we haven't done in a generation. I hope we haven't forgotten how. Hi, I'm Michael Dunne, and this is Cars and Culture with Jason Stein.
If anybody knows culture relative to the Chinese dominance that is moving around the world, it is Michael Dunne. What a pleasure to have you on the program. We're talking cars and culture, but we're mostly going to talk China. Welcome in.
Thank you so much for having me, Jason. I've been looking forward to this conversation for weeks.
As have I. And I know where you've been for the last few weeks, or last couple of weeks, and you have been overseas doing some spying, if you will, on what exactly is going on in Europe related to Chinese brands. Inform our audience, if you could, on what you've discovered in your recent travels and maybe how folks on this side of the Atlantic should be paying attention.
Just came from Spain, Madrid. It was the annual Faconauto, that's the NADA of Spain, their conference, the largest in Europe, several thousand people there. The big story, Chinese cars are pouring into that market at a record clip. In fact, the fastest growing market for Chinese brands in Europe today is Spain.
Really?
Why? What's going on there? They're bringing low-cost vehicles that at much higher quality than expected, and they're moving fast. So the Spanish consumer, Spanish dealers are saying, bring them, bring them.
BYD would be an obvious one. Who else is moving in?
The leading names there, the ones you see on the streets are MG. That's the British brand that was acquired by SAIC now 20 years ago. Yeah. BYDs are enforced. Also, Chery with a subsidiary brand called Omodo. There's plans to even build a factory in Spain, in Barcelona, next year. So, but Spain is just a microcosm, Jason. If we imagine a map of the world, entire map of the world, we got all the hemispheres and continents, and we color code it red and white. Today, the map is a sea of red with two exceptions. White is USA and Canada. What do I mean by that? No matter where I go, from Mexico to Brazil, Thailand to Indonesia, the Middle East, UK, Australia, it's all Chinese cars being exported into those markets. The only two exceptions in the world are the United States and Canada. That's it. We're on an island here, a lonely island. And what does that mean for dealers or for business people? We might have a false sense of security, like, oh, Chinese cars, much ado about nothing. I don't see them around, but don't make that mistake. They're pouring into markets globally.
And they're accepted by consumers. They're accepted by dealers. As you said, bring it on. So local governments in those areas, in the red areas, to use your example, have open welcoming arms to all of that investment, right?
Absolutely. And maybe the best illustration of that is Mexico, right here on our southern flank. China's now the number one supplier of cars to the Mexican market. They shipped more than 300,000 cars there last year. And when I talk to Mexican officials and dealers, they say, why? Simple, low cost, affordable for for our consumers, for our constituents here in Mexico. And that's a theme that I've seen play out in Brazil, across Europe, Southeast Asia. The Chinese are just flooding in. To put the numbers in perspective, China exported more or less about 1 million cars in 2020. 4 years later, last year, that jumped to 6 million cars, number one in the world, more than Japan, more than Germany. So even though we don't see it here, it's real and it's coming. Eventually, we're going to have to confront it here as manufacturers or dealers in North America.
And when it comes to electric vehicles, as you have written, China enjoys overwhelming superiority. China's EV and battery production is 10 times greater than that in the United States. 10 times. So
we are the underdog, Jason. We used to be the center of the global auto industry. No longer. China dominates on so many fronts. The number one capacity in the world. They have enough capacity to supply half the world's demand. They produce 3 times as many cars as we do. They build more electric vehicles than all other countries combined. They utterly dominate batteries and battery supply chains. It's like if an alien came down to Earth right now and checked in with us, and they said, where do we go? Where's the center of the automotive action today and going into the future? Yeah, it's pretty much hands down this place called China.
a modern day Godzilla.
A modern day Godzilla, yes.
And just in 2023, China blew past Japan to become the world's number one automotive exporter, 5 million vehicles to 120 markets worldwide. So if we think of your global map, Michael, the white areas are not going to be white for very long, are they? Despite all of the conversation.
History says eventually those lower cost products find a way to get into the markets. Now, we're in new territory, though, Jason. This is not just a case of the Japanese or the Koreans before that came in with competitive products, but were our friends and allies at the same time. We could talk to them and negotiate. Let's ease them in, have them form transplants here. China's a different story. China sees itself in its own, the leader's words. Xi Jinping says it's time now for China to take center stage. That means being number one. And his mantra is make the world more dependent on China, make China less dependent on the world. So these are really fighting words. They're a real challenge. And so people in DC and in Ottawa are looking at that and saying, do we want to allow the Chinese into our backyard? Do we really want to, or should we think, well, okay, this is a new era. We have to keep the walls up.
And I've talked to dealers in America who've said, yeah, I'll do it. I'll sell them. Why wouldn't I? So those listening to this program who have listened to the context that you have painted here, the global context, that understand the reality of low price eventually finds its way into a market, would go, well, I don't know. I'll sell them. Sure. What would you say to them?
Keep in mind that the Chinese never give something for nothing, and they play a zero-sum game. So what does that mean? If I'm a dealer in North America, yes, I might profit from selling BYDs or MGs in the market, but I might also be losing my current franchises. Elon Musk, about a year ago, came out and said, without tariffs and other protections, most legacy automakers would be obliterated within a short period of time. So you win the Chinese business, but you might lose your current cash cows. That's a real risk.
And Chinese automakers who know themselves as well as they know the enemy also know that Detroit does not know Chinese automakers, right?
Right.
And you've written, I thought quite poignantly, Detroit's own identity seems stuck between the grandeur of yesteryear and the raw vulnerabilities of today. And you suggested that we'll use the euphemism for Detroit, Western traditional automakers to compete with the Chinese, it's going to require a monumental effort of what? Guts, tenacity, innovation, and lots of luck. But you've said the starting point is going to be to look in the mirror. Who are we, Detroit? That's your advice, isn't it? Can you expand on that a little?
It really is. As a Detroiter, this comes close to home, right to the heart of the matter. The U.S., in particular in Detroit, we're in a cocoon where for decades now we're able to manufacture large trucks and SUVs very profitably, sell them to customers who are happy to drive those products. And that's been enough to sustain the companies in America. But if you look at the bigger picture, American automakers globally have been on a massive retreat now for the last couple of decades, and that retreat is accelerating. So if we look around the world, if we look around the world, we're no longer competitive anywhere except in North America. That's not a good, Patton said, nobody ever won a war by playing defense, and that's where we are. We're retreating into North America, into our trucks and SUVs, and then when we step outside of the United States, we're just not there. We're not competitive with the Japanese, Koreans, and the Chinese. Now, when I was president of GM Indonesia about 10 years ago, I remember the leadership at GM saying, hey, you know what? There's only two markets worth playing in anyway globally, and that's China and the United States. So we're going to put all of our bets on those two markets. Okay, fine. They got out of everywhere else, Europe, South America, Southeast Asia, fine. But today, they're no longer competitive in China. So now we're shrinking into just a North American play, and that makes us look really vulnerable. And we have to go on the offensive. We have to learn ways to compete outside of our borders. Full stop.
And I've contended on this program for the last 40 plus episodes that the opening for the Chinese, the point of entry will be offerings that are affordable. Developing offerings that are under $30,000, and affordability has been a flashpoint in North America for quite some time. This is the way in, isn't it, for the Chinese?
Absolutely. Just to put some numbers to that, I think the average cost of a new car last year in America was around $48,000. The average cost of a car exported from China last year was $18,000. So that's their sweet spot. They love manufacturing cars in the $20,000 price range, and that's why they're winning in so many markets globally. If it was an open market economy and everyone were friends, there's no doubt about it, the Chinese would be, the hottest selling cars in America today. Jason, surprisingly high quality, not just low cost, high quality backed up by technology. A story that's not well understood in the West is about 10 years ago, Chinese leaders said, let's bring the Elon Musks of China's tech industry into the auto industry and infuse it with all kinds of innovation and technology. That's exactly what we're seeing. So companies like Xiaomi, which has recently been featured in the New York Times, Huawei, NIO, XPeng, Li Auto, very impressive new products, high quality, advanced technologies. They're the real deal.
And you have written before in some of your newsletter postings some of the reactions from the traditional automakers. And go back to 2023, and the head of Toyota's EV division, Kato-san, came back to Japan after visiting BYD and said, quote, "We're in trouble." Jim Farley called BYD's products an existential threat to Ford's business. And that's for a number of reasons, right? Vertical integration, batteries, product range, design, patents, confidence. We could go on and on and on. But how good are these BYD cars as an example?
Damn good. I've test driven many of them, often alongside dealers from Europe, from North America. And every one of them I ask, well, if Hyundai's a 10 out of 10 in terms of value today in the market, where does BYD stack up? And the numbers come in 9.5, right there. And I say, are you sure? Absolutely sure. And then some of them say 10. Some of them say that BYD. How did they get there? Jason, they have 1 million employees at BYD, 100,000 engineers. They're filing patents like it's going out of style. They have vertical integration. They move with speed. And yes, they do enjoy enormous support from the central government, which is sort of the black box. How much money are they getting? No one will ever know. You can go to China. I live there. The more you dig, the less you know. It's just a black, like that's China. They have a saying in Chinese. They say, 剪不断,理还乱. The more you try to untangle it, the more it gets tangled. So we won't ever know just how much, but I guarantee you that Chinese government is the hand behind the success too. Nothing to take away from BYD as a car company that people work very hard and they're smart, but they also have that extra juice from the government.
And any new car company is going to go through growing pains, and some of these Chinese companies are, whether it's quality in a JD Power China 2024 IQS study that you had referenced, or labor standards, or over dealering in some markets. But what I'm hearing, Michael, is, I mean, when we know this, you and I have talked about it before, it's all about the long-term vision. When Toyota moved from California to Dallas, they said it was a 100-year vision. I would guess that the Chinese vision is 1,000 years. Correct?
Yes, yes. The Chinese do play a long game. They're very patient. And they have this playbook, call it a China playbook, that I call state capitalism, which is unfamiliar to most Americans. But it's very important to understand. What is state capitalism? They will target an industry, they being the leaders in Beijing, and say, we want to totally dominate this industry. The way we're going to do this, we're going to accumulate massive capacity at home, create a fierce competition at home with price wars, and induce our manufacturers to go global and win markets worldwide. And we've seen that happen and play out in solar panels, in steel, in shipbuilding. Hell, when I first went to China, it was buttons. Whatever the industry of the year is, they target it and they overwhelm it. And the bad news for global automakers today is China's target is now automotive. They have capacity to supply half the world's demand. They're shipping cars at a greater rate than any other country, and they're hell-bent on absolutely dominating this industry into the future. So this isn't Japan or Korea from before, where we had some serious competition. This is more like war. Yeah.
Well, there it is. You've described that state capitalism arena before, and it comes with securing a manufacturing license with the help of a government sponsor. It's getting billion-dollar loans and building plants with highly engineered technology. Get another billion, build another plant, build plants in different provinces, diversify, and then go after the rest of the world. It seems like an unfair fight, doesn't it?
It really does. People ask, well, how do we compete with that? And that's one of the reasons why I have been, an advisor to the folks in Washington at high levels in the last several years. And the purpose of the tariffs that are in place right now is not simply to protect our domestic industry, but more importantly, to buy time. Number one, because if the gates are open, the Chinese would be in here big time. And then more importantly than buying time, or at the same point, we also want to induce manufacturing inside the United States. And you go, okay, wait a second, does that work? Does that happen? Can that be successful? And the irony here is this is exactly what China did 25 years ago. When I was living there, Jason, they said, we don't have an auto industry. We're not competitive. We're not leaders in technology. We don't have the management team. What do? Oh, first thing we do is we're going to erect these massive trade barriers, starting with tariffs. They had 100% tariffs. They said, we don't want any imports. We don't want any. If you want to sell into our market, you must manufacture inside China. And when you manufacture inside China, by the way, you must form a joint venture and the Chinese side will have 50%. That was the cost of market access into China. I see the current efforts out of DC with the tariffs in a similar vein. I think the Trump administration says if you want access to the US market, you better manufacture in the US or Canada for access to those markets. Will it work? Only time will tell, but China's already the sort of precedent for, yeah, actually, if you look around the world, Jason, imports as a share of the market in Japan, about 5%. Korea, about 10%. China, 3%. And people are up in arms saying, why does the United States have such high tariffs? Well, half of our sales in the US last year were imports. Half. So it's almost like we're late to the party, didn't get the memo. Now we're applying the same principles of saying, oh, tariffs. Maybe tariffs can induce investments in manufacturing inside our country, just like we've seen them do in Asia.
And the collision of economic systems is truly a battle for the future, isn't it? And right now, one side is moving faster, is thinking bigger, is building smarter.
Absolutely true. And we've got to get that sense of urgency like this. It's on, Jason. It's on.
So I mentioned building smarter as well. You've also said Western leaders and businesses have to wake up right now. And that requires innovation, agility, investment in next generation technologies. Is the West capable of doing this and applying the same amount of resilience and persistence that the Chinese are doing?
We've been here before, Jason. 1941, Pearl Harbor. What was it? 1958, Sputnik moment. We've been caught by surprise in the past. Chips were down. We were outsmarted and out-hustled by our enemies, by our adversaries. Here we go again. China definitely enjoys supremacy across the board, whether you're talking capacity of production or price, costs of doing business, subsidies. So we have to first and foremost understand that this is genuinely an existential moment. Just look at companies like Nissan right now, or even Honda, that are finding themselves like BYD is bigger than both of those companies. They're finding themselves back on their heels, reeling from the competition that they're facing in markets all over the world from the Chinese. And it's from the Chinese perspective, it's a zero-sum game. As the Chinese like to say, 你死我活, you die, I live. And when they say, let's have a win-win situation, let's have a win-win agreement here, it means Chinese side wins twice. So, so all kidding aside, having lived and worked in China, Jason, for so many years, I want to double underline that the Chinese, when it comes to business, are all business. There's no fooling around. They're tenacious as hell. They're unrelenting, and they're a force the likes of which we have not confronted before. And as I lived here in California, it's relaxed. Hey, enjoy your life. Take it easy. No, we look soft and we look naive to the Chinese. That won't do. We have to up our game.
Let's get into a little bit of your personal history. I'm guessing that it was not your intended path to become an expert on China when you went to the University of Michigan, took marketing and finance, although you did do Chinese and Thai language, if I understand that correctly, right?
That's right. I did. Yes. Yes, sir.
But you grew up in a car family. That part was given. Certainly not a family focused on Chinese cars, but a car family. Your dad was an incredible force in terms of documenting culture. Tell the audience about that a little bit.
Yeah. Jim Dunne, larger than life guy. Absolutely. Yeah. So Car Spy, as a teenager, my first job was to go with him as the getaway car driver, if you will. We'd go out to places like Milford, Michigan, that GM Proving Grounds there, up to Kappa's Casing, Canada for
Ontario
testing. Yeah. Out west to Death Valley, all in the pursuit of that next generation camouflaged car. And he'd have his long lens Nikon camera out the passenger side window, and he'd give directions: go faster or slower, speed up, go. Jesus, there's something to go. Let's go get that one. So he was a man of action and always said, wherever the action is, go there. Don't sit in your office and look at the ceiling and hope it'll come to you. It doesn't work that way.
I just want to back up because for those who are listening may not understand what spy photography is. And spy photography, if you look at any, I'm going to go back a little bit, the Car and Drivers and the Road and Tracks and the Automotive Newses and Automobile Magazine, there would be these camouflaged vehicles that were emerging out of testing facilities, like you said. And it was for the automaker to make sure that the car could run effectively, and they would do a bunch of testing on it. That's what he was photographing. He was photographing future product, right? Stuff that nobody ever saw before, which, by the way, when you cracked open a Car and Driver or a Road and Track, you went, that's what's coming. The Buick has an SUV coming. Okay, they've never done one of those before. That was a pretty competitive business, wasn't it, Michael?
Super competitive. He was the most competitive person I ever knew. And he was hell-bent on getting pictures of that next generation vehicle before anyone else. He used to tell me, look, I write for Popular Mechanics. It was a monthly at the time. How can I compete? Oh, I know how to compete. I'm going to get those photos of those camouflage vehicles before anyone else. And we'd find ourselves up in trees sometimes. We'd find ourselves, out in Death Valley when it's 130 degrees and just sweltering. And sure enough, he'd get his target. He paid for the education of our seven kids in our family, a college education through that business of capturing next generation photos. So the point, what I learned from it is go to where the action is and always think what's coming next. And at school at Michigan, the United States and China were just normalizing relationships. I had a couple of professors there who said, hey, if you want to know what the big thing is in your life, it's going to be China. And that got my attention.
Who told you that? Who told you that?
A couple guys. One was Michael Oxenberg. The other one was Kenneth Lieberthal, two very high-profile professors at the University of Michigan. This is 1988 when they said it. And it was 1990 that I graduated with a joint degree at MBA and a degree in Chinese. I knew how to speak Chinese by the time I graduated. Went to China right out of school, handed in my master's thesis, bought an airline ticket, $3,000 and an Apple computer, went to China, landed, and went to register my company with the Chinese authorities. What was my company? I don't know. I was going to bring American cars to China to sell them into the Chinese market, 1990. So when I registered the company, the cadre there said, okay, everything checks out except for your business plan. You're going to sell American cars here. There's no car market in China. We only have bikes.
Bicycles.
There's no income. There's no private market. We make some cars, but they all go to government officials. So we're not exactly sure what your intentions are here. And I thought, well, that's a good point. I didn't think it through that well. But you know how life is. You just sort of hang around until that first opportunity comes.
That's 35 years ago, roughly. And you landed where? In Beijing or Shanghai?
In Beijing. And in those days, wow. Dusty streets, quiet, everyone in blue and gray, no makeup, no style, no five-star hotels. The airport was tiny, a two-lane road going back and forth. China was poor, definitely poor, but you can sense they were opening up and had an ambition. We want to be as wealthy and strong as Japan, as Germany, and as the United States. You could already sense it, even though they had nothing.
How could you sense it? How did you know that?
They were hungry for information, hungry, curious, questions. How do we get better? They'd even say, oh, we're a backward country. How do we get unbackward? How do you guys do it? Show us how. We want to know. And you could, that's that hunger and the curiosity was palpable from the time I stepped into the country.
When did you, so you founded what was then known as Automotive Resources Asia,
yes,
right?
Yes.
So when did you get the sense that the tide was changing. You could feel the hunger, sense the hunger. But what was that moment where you said, "Oh, okay, the tables have turned"?
Probably China did a fantastic job of having Ford and GM compete against each other for the rights to invest $1 billion into Shanghai to manufacture a high-level, what they called an executive car, an exclusive car at the time, which turned out to be a Buick. So GM competed fiercely with Ford, went over 3-4 years of negotiation. Ultimately, China awarded that contract to GM. GM started building Buicks. It cost $40,000-$50,000, and private individuals began to buy them. You thought, oh, the Chinese are getting to have money now. How are they doing this? So they were doing it by manufacturing other products and shipping them abroad. But you got for the sense for the first time, oh, the Chinese have money and they have an appetite for cars.
As set out in one of those 5-year plans, I'm sure, at one point, where they said, well, we're going to dedicate our time and attention to these. And interestingly, Buick had been there for forever as an executive vehicle, right? The Americans were already in China for a long time.
Yes. The last emperor's car back in the 19 teens was a Buick. And GM went to China and said, we won the negotiation against Ford. We were going to bring Chevys. And the Chinese partners said, no, Chevys, no Chevys. We don't want Chevys. Oh, okay, we'll bring the Cadillac. Oh, no, Cadillac's too ostentatious. That's not appropriate. Whoa, not Chevy, not Cadillac. Which one? Buick. We want Buick here. And so the GM people were like, really? Okay, Buick it is. And it turned out to be spectacularly successful, Jason. Within the next 10 years, they started to sell millions and millions of Buicks at profit there.
There was a requirement, though, for Western automakers as they started to tumble into the country and see the opportunity. And the requirement was you had to be with us, 50-50 JV, which set the entire stage for where we are today, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So global automakers looking at the China market, oh, billion potential customers. Oh, the greatest growth market of our time. Let's sell into the China market. So the Chinese said, no, you won't be exporting your cars here. If you want to sell them here, you must manufacture in China. And if you manufacture in China, you must partner with one of our state enterprises. So in the case of GM, it was Shanghai Auto Industry Corporation, owned by the city of Shanghai. In the case of Beijing, it was the Beijing Auto Industry Corporation, owned by the city of Beijing, and so on. So if you think back about it, the Chinese were so clever. Hey, bring your investments. We'll own half your business. Bring your suppliers. Bring some more capital. Bring your technology while you're at it. And yes, you can sell some cars here. We'll take half the profits, and we'll take all of the technology transfer. That was the deal.
In hindsight, Michael, it's crazy. Who would agree to that?
It's crazy. And it's one of those situations where even living on the ground in China, you're looking at the situation, you're going, we're heading for this colossal crash at the end of the road, but we're going full speed anyway. Why doesn't anyone resist the temptation to go, no, I'm not going to do that? Well, it became a situation of almost, I remember Carlos Ghosn saying, we cannot not go in, because if we don't go, Toyota or someone else will go in instead of us. So the Chinese really, really played us cleverly and used their leverage, the leverage of the promise of a market, to draw us into that.
I remember former Volkswagen Daimler executive Wolfgang Bernhardt spent some time in the United States as well, predicting, he said, the Japanese came and they built products and they moved at a certain pace. And then the Koreans came and they went double the speed of the Japanese. And this is probably 15 years ago. And the Chinese will come and they will be at 5 times the speed that the Koreans were. So, anecdotal story. I went to the Shanghai Auto Show probably at least 15 years ago at this point. And they had a copy, it looked like, of a BMW X5 that was on display. And the doors were locked. You couldn't actually get into the vehicle because frankly, the quality wasn't very good at that point, and they didn't want you to see inside the vehicle. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
Right. Well, fast forward just a few years later, oh, they opened the doors all right. And when the doors were opened, the traditional Western automakers went, we have a problem. That's how fast they moved, right, Michael?
They move extremely, they call it China's speed, and they're able to design, develop, engineer, and manufacture cars at about half the time that is required by Western automakers, including the Japanese and Koreans. So they have an expression in China called 996 Jiu Liu. It means 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week is standard. And then weekends, yes, they work really hard, nonstop. They also have the benefit of throwing multiple teams of people at a single development task. So, for example, a motor in an electric vehicle, they won't have one team on it. They'll have three teams in parallel working on the same thing. That just accelerates the whole development process. So they're formidable. I remember you talking about the auto show, 2023, after China opened up for the first time after the auto show, after COVID. My good friend Klaus Meyer, former CEO at Mercedes-Benz China, called me from the show. I was going to meet him there the next day. He called and said, "Mike, get ready for a shock. I cannot believe my eyes. The Chinese have taken over. The days of the Western automakers are finished here." And I said, "Klaus, you got to be kidding me. Mercedes? Even, yes, I'm telling you, it's a shock. Wait till you get here." And that was a moment in time, 2023, April, Shanghai Auto Show. Whoa. It used to be all the Chinese brands were in the corridors, dimly lit over to the side, and it was all Western brands front and center. And you went there and you saw it flipped and you could feel it. Uh-oh. Just like that, just like there was an executive from Toyota went to visit BYD. He saw what BYD was doing and said, "We're in trouble." That's the speed and the magnitude of change that happened, pre-COVID and then post-COVID. It's like, how Superman used to go into the telephone
phone booth.
Yeah.
Elon Musk understands it. He understands China's advantages. And it's no coincidence, right, that his gigafactory accounts for half of Tesla's total global production. He knows where this is headed. And there's also some who aren't in the industry might not understand the concept of vertical integration. But both Tesla and the Chinese do it the same way, don't they?
Absolutely. Elon talks about vertical integration, that is building everything yourself instead of relying on outside suppliers. And his number one reason I found to be really compelling was, if you do all your own stuff, you control innovation. If you ask others to do your parts for you, they're in charge of the innovation. It may be fast or slow. So BYD has taken that model and taken it to an extreme, so much so that they make their own batteries, their own battery supply chains. They're investing in mines for the minerals that go into the batteries. They do processing. And most recently, they started to buy their own roll-on, roll-off ships, Jason, so that they're shipping thousands of cars around the world on BYD ships. That's the extent of their vertical integration. It allows them to control the whole process and reduce costs by cutting out suppliers.
You talk a lot about exports. We talked about this earlier, but you've posed a question recently in one of your newsletters. If China can jump from 1 million exports in 2020 to 6 million in 2024, what is to stop China from shipping 12 million annually by 2028? And by the way, let's give our listeners a little bit of context. During the dark days of COVID, there were less than 12 million vehicles sold in the entire United States. And this would be the number that would be exported exclusively from China. And what is to stop China's car blitzkrieg, as you've said, from shattering 100 years of Western car dominance? I've known you for a long time. You've been on the forefront of this. Give me your prediction. Where does this go? Where does it go in the next 3, 4, 5 years, both inside and outside of China?
Keep an eye on Europe. Just came from there last week, Jason. Europe's in play, very vulnerable. The Chinese have ownership in Mercedes-Benz. They own the Volvo brand. They're investing there in plants. They're, if Chinese automakers win Europe, then we're looking at a world in which only the United States and Canada are places where the Chinese are not. And from that stance, the Chinese have this, if I could back up some history, I think it's relevant here. During the Chinese Civil War, 1945 to 1949, Mao Zedong found himself way inland in the countryside. And Chiang Kai-shek, with the help of the United States, occupied the wealthy and industrialized coastal cities, Shanghai and Beijing and Qingdao. And Mao said, how are we going to win this war? We're going to win this war by taking the countryside, surrounding those cities, and eventually overwhelming those cities with our numbers and with our might. Well, like we see exactly the same thing playing out globally today, where the Chinese are taking the countryside, that is South America, Southeast Asia, Africa, Middle East, Europe, and leaving us on an island that would eventually be overwhelmed, just like Chiang Kai-shek was overwhelmed in that civil war. That's what we're looking at. And in order to stop that, we'd have to get together with our allies. Do we have allies still? With our allies to say, that's enough. We're putting up tariff walls. They're serious. And we understand you play a different game than we do. It's called state capitalism. And your ambition is to completely overwhelm and decimate our industries, including jobs. No, we don't want that. We're going to play your game too and put in place protections and build up our own industry. Almost like, I don't want to sound, what is it called? What's the word? I don't want to sound extreme, but it's almost as if this is a battle, Jason. It's a battle for supremacy over the future of the auto industry globally, and the Chinese have ambitions to be it.
And Europe has an interest in things like battery technology and EVs more than anything else. But there's no turning back on this now. Going back to your Spain example, there's no turning back.
There's no turning back. The Chinese have manufacturing capacity and ambition. They manufacture at 25% lower cost than any other country in the world. How do you compete with that? Unless you say, take a page from China's own playbook and say, you want access to Europe, you want access to the United States, you manufacture in those markets, you hire tens of thousands of people, you transfer technology, and oh, by the way, you give half ownership to an American or European company. Yeah, that the Chinese would have zero to complain about because it's exactly what they did starting in the 1990s.
Why does Warren Buffett, why did he shed his BYD holdings? He held, an enormous share at one point, right? But he's cut his BYD ownership by more than half, you wrote recently. Why?
It's got to be geopolitics. You know, part of it's smart profit taking. Yeah, Taiwan, BYD's there. And with regards to his investment in TSMC, the world's leading chip maker, he had earlier said, I love the company, I just don't like the location. And I think the same thinking applies to BYD. Buffett probably doesn't want to see himself associated with a company that's firmly backed by the Chinese Communist Party as that company starts taking market share globally. He's saying, I'll take my profits, I'm going to drive my shares down. I don't like the volatility, the geopolitics.
Yeah, that makes sense. You travel so many places. You have traveled, especially in the last year, as you told me, so many places to look at the Chinese story from different angles. When you come back to America and report back to those who I'm sure have many questions, what is your one lasting message to them?
It's a Sputnik 2 moment that we face. It is existential. We have to get into a mindset of It's now or never. We have to hustle and change and fight and battle like we haven't done in a generation. I hope we haven't forgotten how. So take the same intensity we bring to Sundays of NFL football or NHL, championship hockey, Stanley Cup, seventh game. That level of intensity is going to be required to win. Anything short of that, the Chinese will roll through us. That's
Detroit's got to dig deeper, doesn't it? It's got to rediscover its determination.
It has to rediscover, rekindle, reignite that determination. We love to compete. We haven't seen a competitor like this before. So all hands on, full tilt.
One of the last, I'm going to leave you with a couple sentences that you, in a column that you wrote last year for Automotive News. The hour of battle has come. Detroit has a choice. Hunker down some more, defend shrinking positions, and gradually fade into oblivion, or understand this is an existential moment. Now, not 1 minute later, is the time for Detroit to get back on the offensive. In a column that led with Sun Tzu's Art of War, know the enemy and know yourself. In 100 battles, you will never be in peril. Whew. You couldn't have imagined this when you picked up from Ann Arbor and bought that plane ticket so long ago.
I couldn't. It was so delightful to arrive in China and see them on bicycles and think, well, maybe they'll buy some cars. Whoa. Have they ever risen?
You might be the reason. Michael.
Yes.
Michael Dunne, thank you so much for being on the program. I really appreciate your wisdom. We'll have you back again.
Thank you so much for having me, Jason. Always enjoyable, the conversation with you.
Great. Thank you.